Hello, thanks for joining us. Coming up on today's show. 50 years ago, he returned from the Vietnam War. 25 years ago, he won the Pulitzer Prize for his stories of Vietnamese immigrants in America. Through his 16 novels, translated into more than 20 languages, he's explored the conflict several times. But it's in his book Perfume River he tackles the long shadows cast by conflict most plainly and elegantly. Let's meet the award-winning author Robert Olen Butler. Robert, welcome to the show.
I'm delighted to be here.
I'm delighted you're here too. Perfume River has just been translated into French. It's a novel that examines family ties and the legacy of the Vietnam War through one Florida family. You said it pulls together everything you've ever known or experienced.
Well, yes. You know, I always cite Graham Greene, the great British novelist, who once said that all good novelists have bad memories. He says, what you remember comes out as journalism, what you forget goes into the compost of the imagination. And indeed, Perfume River, for me, I just turned 73 a couple of weeks ago, for me, it is, it deals with more strata in my compost heap than any other book I've written.
Why was it time now to face this issue, Vietnam, your experience of Vietnam, head on?
Well, I'm afraid all the problems, many of the problems that we face now, really grew out of that war. It's interesting. The impression of war that most people have is, and rightly so, is that cutting edge of rifle firing and helicopters and artillery. But in fact, over 80% of the people who go to war never see battle like that. For the other 80%, and for indeed with Vietnam, where everybody at home watched it on television, for most people, the war was not directly about the horrors of battle. It was about the collision of cultures.
Did you see the horrors of battle?
Not in the way that you see on the Ken Burns documentaries, for instance. No, I was in Vietnam. There were no front lines. So what you saw, where I watched a man immolate himself in protest. When I came into country and I was in the base camp where I was being reassigned, a rocket came in on the edge of the camp. But no, it was. Everyone was always on edge. It was like modern war with the IEDs, where you could be passing in a Jeep in a charming little town, and someone would roll a grenade underneath you. So you were always in a kind of intense, heightened state of sensual being. And too many of us then had a new sense of where to draw the line around yourself. It redefined the Vietnam War. Who is your own and who is the other? And who do you keep inside the circle and who do you exclude and understand that they are not worth your emotional engagement? And you can hear now why this is the time, because I am describing, unfortunately, the state of America and indeed the state of the world at the moment.
Now, the story follows two brothers, Robert and Jimmy. They're estranged for nearly 5 decades. Robert enlisted for the Vietnam War. Jimmy didn't. And for that reason, he cut ties with his family, much to his father's disappointment. In the book, you examine cowardice and bravery, what they really mean. Yeah. What's the answer to that?
Well, cowardice and bravery, in this case, however, they are functions of some deeper issues. Cowardice, bravery, all of the things that we think of, even the flashpoints in our culture, race and culture and ethnicity and family. It's a father and son book that they are yearning in their cowardice or their bravery and how they would define that. They are trying to get a thing that in this book and these sons, they will forever be frustrated in, and that is the respect and love of their father, who is also a war veteran and who has his own secrets. And our two brothers keep their secrets as well.
Now, you've already examined failing marriages in your book, A Small Hotel, but this novel really captures the fatigue of coupledom. You yourself have been married 5 times.
Yes, I have.
I wondered if you could tell us what your thoughts are on how to make a relationship work and be long-lasting.
Yeah, well, love and marriage has to do with giving to the other, but also it's crucial in that you choose someone whose gaze upon you, you can recognize yourself through that. And if you recognize that, I think the failure to recognize that you're both individually and relying on each other to understand who you are individually, recognizing that and living by that, I think that's where things go wrong or right.
Okay, well, I want to talk a bit about your career now, so we can
right.
understand you a little bit more as you're talking about there. And your first book, The Alleys of Eden, was rejected around 20 or so times. Obviously, it was finally published. What did you learn from that experience?
What I learned from that is that the work must be everything. You put it out in the world, you do the best you can do to break through. And I think I didn't get published until, this sounds a little mystical, but until I was ready internally to go, you know, it's not going to make any difference. If this book never gets published, I'm going to go on and write more books, as I've been writing for a long while, because it's, for a literary writer, we are creatures of our bodies and of our senses, and art objects are sensual objects we create. But we do that in order to articulate and explore and articulate our vision of the order behind the apparent chaos of life in the body on planet Earth.
You won the Pulitzer Prize not that long after that with A Good Scent from a Strange Mountain in 1993. Tell us about the fortuitous meeting that you had that you think maybe helped you win that prize.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. When I wrote that book, I was sent on my very first book tour, and 6 people showed up. And I was at a crossroads because I was trained as an actor and I knew how to perform. But a lot of authors get very depressed about this, and I certainly was too. And they usually will take 6 people and say, hey, let's just circle up some chairs and I'll answer some questions. You talk for 20 minutes and you leave. But I thought, you know, I'm going to give these people, I'm going to give them everything I've got. And I did. I read my heart out to them. And I signed a lot of books. I went on my way. The next morning, Charles Johnson came into the shop. Now, Charles Johnson was a wonderful, is an African-American novelist, had won his own National Book Award. And he came in the next day and said, I heard you had a reading. And he said, how was it? Oh, it was fabulous. It was great. He says, a terrific book. And he bought the book. Charles Johnson read your book. Well, here's what happens with the Pulitzer Prize. Every year there's a jury of 3 people, writers and reviewers, who send 3 finalist books. And by the way, these jurors have to be responsible for 4,000 or so books. But they choose 3 out of the 4,000. But each one, 3 books, 3 jurors, they choose one book, their own favorite book. Goes to the 18-person Pulitzer Advisory Board who chooses the winner. You know where I'm heading. The person who chose A Good Scent from a Strange Mountain was Charles Johnson. And he chose that from the 4,000. Would I be sitting here with you today, Eve, and if I had not read my heart out to 6 people on a pretty spring night in Seattle, Washington? And the answer is no. I deserve to win the Pulitzer, but would I have? No.
Okay, I just want to talk about one other book called Severance. I really love the concept from 2006. It's a collection of short stories imagining the last thoughts of various characters from Nicole Brown Simpson to Louis XVI, and including yourself. Now, the concept is every story is 240 words long, based on the theory that when someone is decapitated, they carry on thinking for a minute and a half, which is about 240 words. You talk about many famous people. I wanted to ask you, can you imagine what Donald Trump's last 100 or so words or thoughts would be? 240 words would be.
Right. I noticed you were going to say what his last thoughts are, but I don't think there are any thoughts in that head. But I believe his last words would be to say that there has never been a better decapitation than this. I have more blood in my head than anyone else who has ever lived and ever died, and it would be a continuing tap dance of his own self-regard.
And in Hell, in 2009, your book, and the story was of Hatcher McCord, a newsreader who's in hell. He's with various famous people as well, including William Shakespeare, Humphrey Bogart and Richard Nixon. Who would you like to find yourself in hell with?
Probably Graham Greene himself. Hell for me would have to be a continuation of writing books.
Okay, and we finish our show every day with our guest's cultural pick. What have you chosen for us today, Robert?
Well, Yuzhi Wang's wonderful renderings of on the piano of the Maurice Ravel's piano concertos, both of them. I always write to music. The thing that my students tend to forget is that art does not come from the mind or from ideas. It comes from the place where you dream. And so I use carefully chosen music to enhance my creative process. And her Ravel's piano concertos are full of passion and brooding. And I think that would be my suggestion.
Okay. Well, Robert, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to have you on the show.
A delight.
And your book, Perfume River, has just been translated into French. Remember our website. We're also on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. There's more news coming up on France 24 after this.